Elliana's heart pounded with every step as she walked deeper into the thick bush, her hands filled with bundles of dry firewood. Her mind was clouded with the sting of her mother's words that morning. Sandra, her mother, had been especially bitter today, reminding Elliana how useless she was, how she could never amount to anything. The cruel slap that followed only echoed in her thoughts. She had never been good enough in her mother's eyes, and today was no different. "You must be a fool to think you can change anything. Go fetch firewood for the house," Sandra had yelled, her voice dripping with anger as she threw Elliana out of the house. Elliana sighed as the weight of the firewood dug into her shoulders. The village had always been unforgiving, especially for girls like her. While the other young women were exchanging their bodies for money from the foreign workers at the nearby mining site, Elliana had made a vow to herself. She wanted something different. She wanted to go to school, to be more than just another girl stuck in a never-ending cycle of poverty. "I'll be a doctor and I'll change this village," she whispered to herself as the smell of damp earth and leaves filled her lungs. She didn't know how it would happen, but she trusted in the power of faith. As she walked deeper into the bush, she noticed a faint groan. At first, she thought it was the wind, rustling through the trees, but then she heard it again. A weak voice, faint but undeniable. Elliana stopped in her tracks. Her heart began to race as she scanned the surroundings. Another groan. "Is someone out there?" she called out. The voice came again, even weaker this time. It was coming from behind a thick bush. With cautious steps, Elliana made her way toward the sound, her eyes widening as she saw a man lying on the ground. He was pale, his clothes torn and dirty, his overgrown beard looked wild and unkempt, and his breathing was shallow, like a man on the edge of life. Elliana's heart skipped a beat. She rushed toward him, dropping the firewood in a heap beside her. "Hello? Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The man barely moved. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked up at her with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. He couldn't speak, his breath coming in short gasps. Elliana quickly reached for the small container of water she had been carrying. She poured some of it into his cracked lips, hoping to give him some relief. "Don't worry, I'll help you," she murmured, her voice soft but steady. The man tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He managed a weak smile, his eyes locking with hers as if to say, "Thank you." Elliana helped him sit up, his weight heavy against her. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, and though he was much larger and heavier than her, she didn't hesitate. She had been carrying firewood and water for years. This man wasn't any different. With a grunt, she placed her arms around his torso and helped him to his feet. He wobbled, almost falling, but Elliana held him steady. "Can you walk?" she asked gently, though she already knew the answer. He shook his head weakly, and that was all the encouragement Elliana needed. Without thinking twice, she bent down and hoisted him onto her back, her arms locking around his chest as she began to carry him. Her legs trembled with the weight, but Elliana pushed on, step after step. The journey to the village clinic felt like it would never end, and the man's faint breaths against her neck made her heart race in fear. What if she couldn't make it? What if she was too late? She focused on the clinic, her mind set on the goal. She could hear the hum of village life around her, but everything felt like it was in slow motion. She needed to get him help. He was depending on her. As she entered the village, people stopped in their tracks, staring in disbelief. The sight of Elliana, a girl who never associated with men, carrying a grown man on her back, was nothing short of shocking. But she didn't care about the stares. She was too focused on the man's shallow breathing and the distance still left to cover. At the clinic, the nurse rushed out to meet her, eyes wide with surprise. "Elliana, what are you doing? Who is this?" she asked, helping the girl gently lower the man onto a nearby bench. "I found him in the bush. He's barely alive. Please, help him," Elliana pleaded, her voice trembling. The nurse looked at the man and then back at Elliana, confusion etched on her face. "We don't have the resources for this," she muttered, but Elliana could see her struggle. "I don't have money," Elliana said, her voice breaking, "but I have this." She pulled out her small phone, an old model, and placed it on the counter. "Please, take it. Just save him." The nurse hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We'll try." As the doctor worked quickly to stabilize the man, Elliana ran back to the bush, not stopping to catch her breath. She picked up the firewood she had abandoned earlier, but the weight in her chest wasn't from the bundles she carried. It was the fear that the man might not survive. When she returned home, her mother was waiting for her, her face twisted in rage. Sandra didn't speak a word. She just slapped Elliana hard across the face, sending her crashing to the ground. "You think you can deceive me? You think I don't know what you've been doing? Carrying men around the village like some stretcher?" she spat, her voice venomous. Elliana stayed on the ground, tears streaming down her face. She didn't argue back. All she could do was sob. It didn't matter what she did. It was never enough for her mother. The next morning, Elliana awoke with a heavy heart. She snuck out before dawn, determined to find out what happened to the man. She walked to the clinic and peered inside, hoping to find him still there. To her shock, the man was sitting up on the bed, smiling. He looked alive, full of life. He had been transformed overnight, as though her simple act of kindness had restored him. "Hey," she whispered, her voice shaking. You're okay?" He looked at her with a smile that lit up his face. "Thanks to you," he said softly, his voice stronger than before. "You saved my life." And just like that, everything changed. Yesterday he had been barely breathing, his body limp and lifeless in her arms. Now, here he was, sitting up, looking almost as if nothing had happened at all. His pale face had color, and his eyes, still tired but now bright, met hers with gratitude. "You're awake," she stammered, taking a cautious step into the clinic. The man smiled weakly, but his eyes were full of emotion. "Yes, thanks to you." Elliana didn't know what to say. She was overwhelmed by the sight of this man, the one she had carried on her back through the village, now sitting there, alive and well. It didn't make sense. How could he have recovered so quickly? "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice still trembling. "I feel better, much better," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I can't believe you found me, or that you helped me when I couldn't even help myself." Elliana shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's nothing," she muttered. "I just did what anyone would do." The man's expression softened. "Not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have walked right past me. But you saved my life." Elliana felt a knot in her stomach. She wasn't used to compliments. Her mother's harsh words rang in her mind, making her feel small. But this time, the weight of the man's gratitude felt different. It made her heart swell with pride, despite everything she had been through. Before Elliana could say anything else, the clinic door opened and the doctor stepped inside. His eyes widened when he saw the man sitting up. "Mr. David!" the doctor exclaimed, rushing over to him. "You're awake! I didn't expect this kind of recovery so soon." Elliana blinked in confusion. "Mr. David," she repeated, looking from the doctor to the man sitting on the bed. The man, David, as the doctor had called him, looked at Elliana and nodded slowly. "Yes, my name is David," he said, his voice steady now. "David Kalu?" The name sounded vaguely familiar to Elliana, but she couldn't place it. She wasn't really interested in rich or famous people. Her world revolved around the village, school, and her mother. Still, there was something about the way the doctor had reacted. She felt a sense of importance in the air. David continued, his eyes locking with hers. "I know this must be confusing for you, but I owe you my life. I was kidnapped on my way home from Lagos and brought into the forest. I barely managed to escape after 3 days of being held captive." Elliana listened, her heart sinking as he told his story. It sounded like something out of a thriller movie, not the kind of life she had ever imagined for someone. David explained how he had been blindfolded and dragged into the bush, how the kidnappers had made him walk barefoot for days until he had found the strength to run. His escape had been a desperate gamble, but he had made it, only to collapse from exhaustion in the very place where Elliana had found him. David paused, his eyes misting over with emotion. I don't know how I survived. I didn't eat, didn't drink, and didn't trust anyone. But when you came to me, when you gave me that water and carried me, it felt like I had been saved by an angel. Elliana felt a wave of guilt wash over her as he spoke. She hadn't known who he was, only that he needed help. She had never expected this kind of reaction, this kind of gratitude. She had helped him out of compassion, but now she was faced with a man whose life had been changed forever because of her actions. But why are you here? Elliana asked. Why are you in our village? David paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small diary. I'm sorry to bother you with this, he said, holding it out to her, but I need to call my manager. I've been out of contact for days, and I need to tell them where I am. I don't have any money to pay for the hospital, but I can make a call. I'll pay them back for the treatment. He was shocked the moment Elliana told him her phone was with the nurse because she submitted for him to be treated, and she doesn't have money to pay. He became emotional and told the nurse to give the phone to her as he would pay when his people come. David turned to Elliana. You don't understand what you have done for me. You have helped me more than anyone else ever could. Let me make this call. As David dialed the number, Elliana stepped back, feeling a little out of place. She watched him speak into the phone, his voice firm but gentle, explaining where he was and giving detailed instructions for his rescue. As he spoke, Elliana's mind raced. Who was this man, really? How had he ended up here in the small clinic of a remote village after everything he had been through? A few minutes later, David hung up the phone and turned to her. Thank you, Elliana. I've arranged for my people to come get me. It'll be a little while. The helicopter's rotor blades sliced through the air as it touched down just outside the village clinic. The villagers gathered, seeing a helicopter for the first time in their village. Elliana stood frozen, her heart racing in her chest. She couldn't believe what was happening. Only moments ago, David Kalu, the man she had carried from the bush, had been just another stranger in need of help. But now, a helicopter had arrived because of him, and the sight of it made her wonder if she was still dreaming and she had helped a wanted person. Elliana and the medical workers in the hospital came out, shocked at the sight of the helicopter, and wondered who they were looking for, until a well-dressed lady in a business suit came out and told them they were here for Mr. David Kalu, who was being treated at the hospital. At first, they thought he was a criminal being looked for by the government, until the lady bent down and greeted David immediately when she saw him. They were all confused. Elliana stood there, confused, and repeatedly asked herself, who is this man? It was then David introduced himself properly as the CEO of the popular oil company in the country. Elliana couldn't believe her ears. The dying man in the bush she helped was the popular billionaire she had read about in newspapers and blogs. Are you really a CEO? Elliana blurted out, her eyes wide with disbelief. David smiled warmly. Yes, I am. I run a large oil company in Lagos. I know it must be hard to believe, but it's the truth. Elliana's mouth went dry. The thought of a billionaire standing before her seemed impossible. She had read a lot about him, but to see him in person, to have helped one, it didn't feel real. She had always thought people like him existed in another world, a world far removed from the hardships of her village. David paid his bills and blessed the hospital staff handsomely. As for Elliana, with his security guards, he followed her to her house, and her mother became afraid when she saw them approaching, thinking she must have done something bad. But to her surprise, the billionaire bowed, greeted her, and commended her for raising such a kind and wonderful young lady. Mama, thank you for raising this kind soul. She saved my life, and if not for her, I would have been dead inside the bush there. You must have heard the man she carried and took to the hospital. I am the one. I collapsed in the bush after escaping from the kidnapper's den and walked for 2 days in the bush. I am here to say thank you and to change your daughter's story and your story for good. David paused, as though weighing his next words carefully, and turned to Elliana. I know this may be overwhelming, but I want you to understand something. What you did for me, it's beyond anything I could ever repay. You didn't just help a stranger. You saved a life. And because of that, I'm here to make sure your life changes just like mine did. We will be building a mansion for you here, a befitting school, a modern hospital, water, and every other thing that will make life easier for you and other villagers here. For your dream of becoming a medical..." Elliana's mind raced. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She had no idea what he was talking about. How could her life change because of a single act of kindness? Before she could respond, the helicopter pilot called out, urging David to hurry. The woman in the business suit stepped forward, holding a large envelope. "Mr. Kalu, everything is ready for your departure. We need to go now." David turned back to her with a slight nod, but his gaze lingered on Elliana for a moment longer. "I won't forget this. I promise," he said softly. Elliana watched as David climbed into the helicopter, followed by his team. The blades of the helicopter whipped the air into a frenzy, and as the massive machine lifted off, dust and debris flew everywhere, making it hard to see. She squinted into the sky, her mind still trying to process the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. The helicopter disappeared into the distance, leaving Elliana standing alone in the dust, her head spinning. What had just happened? One moment she was an ordinary village girl, struggling to help her mother and survive in a village that didn't offer much hope. The next moment, she had saved a man who turned out to be a billionaire, and now she was left with an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Elliana's mother couldn't believe her eyes, and before David left, he gave them some money and promised to get back. That night, Elliana's mother couldn't sleep. She felt guilty and had to bury her ego and went on her knees to seek forgiveness from her daughter. "Mama, you can't do this. I should be the one apologizing for not being able to explain to you enough and convince you to believe in me." A few days later, Elliana returned to the village clinic. She had been avoiding it, not knowing what to expect. She wasn't sure if David would ever contact her again, or if his promise was just empty words. But when she walked into the clinic that morning, a surprising sight awaited her. The nurse greeted her with a smile. "Elliana, you won't believe what's happening," she said. "Mr. Kalu's team has been in contact with us. They've arranged something special for you." "Something special?" Elliana repeated. Her curiosity piqued. The nurse handed her a small envelope. It was sealed with a gold emblem, one she had never seen before. The letters on it read, "David Kalu Enterprises." Elliana's heart skipped a beat as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a check. She pulled the letter out and read it aloud to herself. "Dear Elliana, I hope this letter finds you well. I want to thank you again for saving my life. It is not often that one comes across such kindness. I will forever be grateful for what you did. I would like to offer you something to change your future. Please, find enclosed a check for 10 million naira. This is just the beginning of the journey I would like to take with you. I have also made arrangements for you to attend one of the best universities in the world to pursue your dream of becoming a medical doctor. The school fees, accommodation, and all expenses will be covered. I believe you have the potential to do great things, and I want to help you unlock that potential. Sincerely, David Kalu." Elliana's hands trembled as she held the check up to the light. 10 million naira. It was more money than she had ever seen in her entire life, and now it was in her hands. The letter was even more overwhelming. She had dreamed of becoming a doctor, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined this kind of opportunity. "But why?" Elliana whispered, her voice shaking. "Why would he do this for me?" The nurse smiled knowingly. "It's because he believes in you, Elliana. People like Mr. Kalu don't just offer help without reason. He sees something special in you, and I think he's right." Elliana sat down on the nearest bench, still trying to comprehend the magnitude of the moment. Her mind raced with thoughts of her future, of a life beyond the village, of becoming a doctor, of finally proving to her mother and the village that she was more than just a poor girl who carried firewood. The nurse's voice broke through her thoughts. "There's more," she said, handing Elliana another letter. This one was thick and official-looking. Elliana's hands were shaking as she tore it open. Inside was a scholarship letter from a prestigious medical university, confirming her acceptance. The letter mentioned that her tuition and living expenses would be fully covered, and she was granted immediate enrollment for the next academic term. Elliana's breath caught in her throat. The dreams she had held onto for so long were no longer just dreams. They were now a reality. That evening, Elliana sat alone in her small room, staring at the check, the scholarship letter, and the university brochures. Her mind was still in disbelief. How had her life changed so dramatically in just a few days? From carrying a dying man through the village to being offered a chance to study medicine at one of the world's top universities, everything had shifted. She looked up at the ceiling, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered into the quiet room. "Thank you, David." She went inside her mother's room and broke the news to her. She could only hug her daughter tightly, with tears in her eyes. "Elliana, I am sorry for ever doubting you," she said, her voice full of emotions. As Elliana whispered her gratitude in her room, doubts crept in. Was she truly worthy of all this? Did she deserve such a chance? And, most pressing of all, what did David expect from her in return? Why had he been so generous, so kind? For now, she had no answers. But one thing was certain: her life had changed forever. The following day, when Elliana returned home, her mother was waiting for her. Sandra stood at the doorway, but as Elliana stepped inside, her mother's voice came softer than she had ever heard. "Elliana, I've been too harsh on you. Maybe I've been blind to everything you've been trying to do. I'm sorry." Elliana reminded her mother again that all she ever did was to ensure she and her had the best life. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a new chapter for both of them, she said. As the sun set on the horizon, Elliana looked out of the window, knowing her journey was only just beginning. But this time, it was different. This time, she was no longer alone. And with a smile, she whispered to herself, "I'm ready." The weeks that followed David Kalu's departure were a blur for Elliana. Her life, which had once been filled with the routine of fetching firewood and helping her mother, was now filled with uncertainty, excitement, and a new sense of purpose. The check for 10 million naira sat in her drawer, a reminder of the promise she had been given. A chance to escape her small village and attend a prestigious university. But with this gift came a heavy weight of responsibility. Elliana wasn't sure how to process everything that had happened. She had saved a stranger from the bush, and now she was being handed a future that she had only dreamed about. The scholarship, the university acceptance letter, the money, everything seemed too good to be true. Every day, Elliana would take the letter from the university and read it again, as if to convince herself that it wasn't a mistake. It was hard to believe that someone like her, a girl from a poor village with no connections, no family wealth, could be granted such an opportunity. She had to remind herself that this was real, that her dreams were finally within reach. A few months later, David's team was in the village, and within 1 month they constructed a befitting house for Sandra and her daughter, dug 10 boreholes for the village, built schools, and reconstructed the village clinic. It was like a dream to the villagers, but it was happening before their eyes, and Elliana often wondered how her little act of kindness turned things around for her and her mother and the entire village. "I never asked for any of this," Sandra had muttered one evening, her back turned as she washed the dishes. "I never asked for someone to take pity on us. But God did his things in a mysterious way, and I am grateful my daughter brought so much joy to the village. Her life is taking a different turn." The opportunity David had given her was a lifeline, a chance to break free from the cycle that had held her family captive for so long. It was a chance to become someone, to make a difference. The day came when Elliana's flight was booked, and she found herself standing at the village bus station, holding a suitcase in her hand. The excitement in her chest was almost unbearable, but so was the fear. This was the moment she had dreamed about, but it also felt like stepping into the unknown. She was leaving everything behind. The familiar sights of her village she had grown up in, the woman who had never truly understood her ambitions until she mended an act of kindness. It felt like she was leaving behind a part of herself. Her heart raced as the bus pulled up to the station, the noise of the engine filling the air. Elliana's hands trembled, but she knew this was her path. The chance to change her life was now within her grasp. As she boarded the bus, she glanced back at the village for one last time. It was hard to say goodbye, but it was time. She had made her decision. She would not let fear or doubt hold her back anymore. The bus ride was long, and Elliana spent much of the journey looking out the window, thinking about all the people she was leaving behind. She thought about her mother, the woman who had never believed in her, and the village that had always treated her like she was invisible. But she also thought about David, the man who had changed her life. He had believed in her when no one else had. And for the first time in a long time, Elliana truly felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be something more. Few days later, Elliana found herself in Lagos, a bustling city that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The sights and sounds were unlike anything she had ever experienced. Tall buildings, busy streets, and the constant hum of life surrounded her. Vivid. It felt like an entirely different world from the quiet village she had grown up in. Elliana's taxi dropped her off at the university's entrance, and she stared up at the grand building in front of her. It was everything she had imagined and more. The gates were tall, and the sprawling campus seemed endless. She couldn't help but feel small standing in front of it, but the excitement was undeniable. She had made it. She was here. As she walked through the gates, she was greeted by students bustling around, all dressed in uniforms and carrying books. They seemed so confident, so sure of themselves. Elliana couldn't help but feel out of place. She had never been part of a world like this, never had the luxury of walking through gates like these, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. She had come this far, and now she had to prove to herself that she belonged here, that she could do this. It wasn't long before Elliana settled into her new life. She attended orientation, met her professors, and made friends with some of her fellow students. But despite her best efforts to fit in, there was always a part of her that felt out of place. She wasn't like the other students. She didn't come from a wealthy family. She hadn't grown up with access to the best schools or resources. Everything about this world was new to her, and sometimes it felt like she was swimming against the current. But she pushed through. She reminded herself of why she was here, because she had a purpose. She wasn't just here to study, she was here to change the world, to make a difference. She thought of her village, her mother, and the people who had always looked down on her. She thought of David, the man who had given her this chance, and she knew that she had to make it count. There were days when she felt like giving up, days when the pressure of everything was too much. But every time she felt like quitting, she would remember the kindness David had shown her. She remembered how she had saved his life, how he had believed in her when no one else had. That thought kept her going, even on the toughest days. One evening, several months into her studies, Elliana sat in her small dorm room, studying for an exam. She had worked tirelessly to catch up on everything she had missed, but the pressure was beginning to take its toll. Her eyes were heavy, and her hands shook from exhaustion. She had barely had time to eat or sleep, always focused on getting perfect grades. As she stared down at her notes, the phone on her desk buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Elliana, I hope this message finds you well. This is David Kalu. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I know things must be tough, but I believe in you. Keep going. You've got this. Remember, I'm here if you ever need anything." Elliana stared at the message, her heart swelling with emotion. She hadn't heard from David in months, and the fact that he was still thinking of her made her feel less alone. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed out a response. "Thank you, Mr. David. Your words mean more than you know. I'm doing my best. I won't give up." As she hit send, Elliana realized something. She had come so far, but she still had a long way to go. The journey was only beginning, and there would be obstacles along the way. But now, she had something she hadn't had before: belief in herself. And with that belief, she knew she could achieve anything. Elliana's life in Lagos had become a whirlwind of hard work, long nights, and moments of doubt. She had grown accustomed to the constant pressure of university life, the endless assignments, exams, and the rigorous pace that seemed to never slow down. But, despite the challenges, there was a fire within her that refused to be extinguished. She thought back to the day she had left her village, the day she had boarded that bus with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. Now, standing on the verge of graduation, she couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. It had been years of struggle, but she was finally here, on the cusp of achieving everything she had ever wanted. And all of it had started with that one decision to help a man in the bush. David's faith in her, his belief that she was destined for something greater, had given her the strength to continue, even when she thought she might break. As Elliana walked across the campus that day, her thoughts were consumed by the future. She had received her final grades, and with them came the confirmation that she had not only passed, but had excelled. She had done it. She had achieved her dream of becoming a doctor. But this wasn't just about the title or the degree. It was about the person she had become along the way. The shy, uncertain girl from the village was now someone entirely different, stronger, more confident, and unafraid of the world. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from David. "Elliana, I hope you're doing well. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to let you know that I'm proud of you. Soon you will eventually become a doctor, and your dream will finally be fulfilled. Keep pushing forward until you are there. I'm always here for you, for anything you ever needed." Elliana smiled as she read his words. It was strange, but every time she heard from David, she felt like everything was falling into place. He had helped her when she had needed it most, and now she had accomplished something she had once thought impossible. She quickly typed a response. "Thank you, Mr. David. Your support has meant the world to me, and you've kept your promise since the beginning of this journey. I wouldn't be here without you. I'm ready for whatever comes next." As she hit send, she felt a sense of finality wash over her. She was ready. Ready to move forward, ready to embrace the future, and ready to make a difference in the world. The day of her graduation ceremony arrived, and Elliana stood at the front of the auditorium, surrounded by her peers. Her heart swelled with pride as she looked out at the sea of faces, knowing that each one of them had worked just as hard as she had to get to this point. But for her, this day was more than just a milestone. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome, everything she had fought for. She had done it. She had become a medical doctor, her childhood dream. As she walked across the stage to receive her certificate, her eyes searched the crowd for a familiar face. She knew her mother, who now believed in her, would be there. Elliana couldn't help but believe that Sandra, her mother, would be proud of her. When she returned to her seat, the ceremony continued, but Elliana's mind wandered. She thought back to that fateful day when she had found David in the bush. She had no idea that one act of kindness would change the course of her life. She had no idea that she would one day stand here, surrounded by success and the promise of a bright future. As she turned, she saw her mother sitting comfortably at the back, smiling and waving at her, and that was all she needed to make her day. The day after graduation, Elliana received an unexpected visitor. She had just finished unpacking her things in her small apartment when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find David standing there, looking as composed and confident as ever, but with a warm smile on his face. "David!" she exclaimed, her heart racing. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to be here for you," David said, stepping into the apartment. "You've worked so hard, and I couldn't let this moment pass without seeing you. I'm proud of you, Elliana." Elliana felt a lump form in her throat. She had worked so hard to get to this point, but hearing David say those words, hearing someone who had believed in her from the very beginning say he was proud of her, made everything feel real. "I never could have imagined this day would come," Elliana said softly, her eyes tearing up. "You changed my life, David. If it weren't for you, I would still be stuck in the village, trying to make a living. I never would have believed that I could become a doctor." David smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it all yourself. I just gave you the chance to prove what you were capable of. You're the one who worked hard, who stayed focused on your dreams. I'm just happy I could help." Elliana looked down at her hands, feeling a mix of emotions. I never thought this could happen. I never thought I could change my life like this." David nodded. "You did, Elliana. And now, it's your turn to give back. There's a world of people out there who need someone like you, someone who understands what it's like to struggle, someone who has the heart and the determination to make a real difference." Elliana swallowed hard. I want to help. I want to change things, make people's lives better, but I don't know where to start." David smiled, his eyes full of encouragement. "You've already started. You're a doctor now, and I believe you'll do amazing things. Don't doubt yourself. You've got the power to change the world." Days turned into weeks, and Elliana settled into her new life as a medical doctor. She began working at a hospital in Lagos, dedicating herself to providing quality care to those who needed it most. But even as she worked tirelessly, she never forgot the village that had shaped her, the mother who had once scorned her, or the man who had changed her life. One evening, Elliana received a call from her mother. "Elliana, I was wrong to have ever doubted you. You've proven that you can do more than I ever believed. I'm proud of you, my daughter. I'm so proud of you." Elliana's heart swelled with emotion as she listened to her mother's words. She never thought she would hear them repeatedly, after thinking of how she used to treat. As Elliana stood by the window of her apartment that evening, she gazed out at the city skyline. She thought back to the girl she had once been, the one who had dreamed of becoming a medical doctor, of changing the world. And now, here she was. On the other side of that dream, living it. Her phone buzzed again, and she smiled when she saw the name on the screen. It was David. "Elliana, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to remind you of something. You have the power to change lives. Keep pushing forward and never forget that you've already made a difference. Don't stop." Elliana read the message and let out a quiet laugh. She had never forgotten the importance of believing in herself. And now, as she looked at the life she had built, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Elliana closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready for whatever it held. And as she whispered into the quiet night, she knew that the journey she had started, from a small village to the heights of success, was just the beginning of something even greater. Her dreams had come true, but now it was time to help others make theirs come true too. If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.